Hi guys, Ivan Fedorenko is here, and in this video I wanted to provide you a brief introduction to B2B marketing and B2B markets. Because the last week we talked a lot about consumer behavior of individual consumers. Yet 90% of all the deal, 90% of all the economy is in B2B sector. That means companies selling not to individual users, but to other companies, to other organizations and the government. Business buyers are very different from individual consumers in how they make decisions and how they buy goods and services. Three biggest differences between individual buyers and business or corporate buyers include, first of all, the volume, the sheer volume of purchases. Instead of buying one pen, a university or a government body will purchase 1,000 pens at once. And that means that each of these transactions is big as important. There's less transactions, but they're more valuable. Also, these transactions are much more complex. Imagine a cleaning company who decides to purchase vacuums for the cleaners to clean houses and offices. That process might include writing a 600 pages long technical specification of the vacuums that they want to purchase. Individual buyers ain't gonna write their own technical specifications. Corporate buyers do it all the time. And very often they need products to be adjusted and customized to their needs. Third, because of this need to adjustment, for customization, and because of the sheer volume of the transaction, there's a huge impact of personal selling. In B2B markets, it's very typical for companies to have salesmen, sales managers who directly interact with customers to help close each particular deal. Personal selling is relatively rare in consumer markets. Short of realtors and car salesmen at the dealerships, we almost never encounter salespeople in our consumer role. In B2B markets, nothing ever happens without a sales manager involved. This sheer volume of transaction and sheer size of the transaction also means that there are fewer customers. If in a consumer market, if we sell, say, car parts to consumers, or car accessories, there are millions of customers. If we are Boeing and we sell airplanes to airlines, how many airlines are there to buy our planes? A dozen? 2 dozen? In fact, 40% of all Boeing business goes to American Airlines, which is the one and largest buyer of Boeing airplanes. Imagine what it would mean for Boeing to lose American Airlines as a customer. And also, buying an airplane takes a lot of time. That's not an impulse buying. Buying an airplane for $400 million takes several years to agree on, to customize, to fund, and manufacture and deliver. So the cycle of purchase, the length of time required for this purchase is much greater. It's important to remember that when businesses decide to buy and purchase goods and services, they don't do it for themselves, for their own needs. They buy goods and services to serve their customers. So the greater is the demand from their customers, the greater is the demand from business buyers to their suppliers. For example, in healthcare markets, hospitals and pharmacies sell medicine, right? To provide medicine to their patients, they need to buy it from pharma companies. Think about the demand for things like weight management medicine, like Ozempic-like style medicine. A huge spike in demand from patients means that now healthcare facilities and pharmacies need to order more of this stuff from pharmaceutical companies. That's what a derived demand is. A demand from business buyers that derives from demand from their buyers, from end users and end customers. And very often, this demand changes on a big scale. Each additional step along the value creation chain, it multiplies. For example, a car includes thousands of parts for interior, for dashboard, for engine, for batteries and tires. So when someone needs a car and they go to a dealership and order a car, the dealership orders a car from car manufacturer, and then the car manufacturer needs to order 1,000 parts from all around the world. And if these suppliers for car manufacturer need to order a lot of raw materials, so even a little change in end demand, in consumer demand, can multiply many times to require a huge spike in demands for all their derived and necessary parts. That's called the fluctuating demand. A little seasonal change in pumpkin products, a little seasonal fluctuation when everyone wants a pumpkin stuff before Thanksgiving, multiplies many, many times throughout the supply chain. And finally, very often, a demand for one thing invokes a demand for other connected services, goods, and accessories. We all experienced it with the recent spike in demand for electric cars. Many consumers realize that the demand for electric cars creates a demand for charging stations. And there is not enough high-performance chargers and superchargers for all the Teslas around. That's what a joint demand is for each electric car we put out on the market, we put out on the road. We need to create some charging stations as well. One thing creates a demand, joint demand for other goods and services. There are 4 basic types of business buyers, 4 types of companies and organizations that buy things from each other. The basic type is producers, companies who actually produce goods and services for customers and for businesses. Then there are resellers. Resellers are the ones who purchase products in huge bulks to resell it. Yeah, like a pharmacy. They buy from pharma companies, buy medicine and medical accessories, and resell them in retail. to end users. Also, there are institutions, which can be non-profits or educational institutions like ours, and governments. Governments are a huge market. Here at the left, I wanted to introduce you one of our recent graduates, Andrew Wright. Andrew works as a government sales lead at DocuSign, electronic signature company, and he leads sales to government entities and pretty much lives between San Francisco and Washington, D.C., constantly negotiating with these government entities. Producers who need goods and services to produce their own products are different in that they transform them. They do not resell them directly, and they do not use them themselves, but they transform them. They might buy steel from steel mines and steel plants to make cars. They completely transform steel into a car. Their end product looks very different from what they buy. They typically buy in huge quantities. In contrast, resellers do not transform goods and services in any way. They just buy them in huge bulk and resell them, sometimes also in huge bulk, like brokers, wholesalers, or sometimes they break them up into smaller chunks and sell them to individual users. Those are retailers. Then there are governments, so-called B2G, or business to government markets. They buy a huge amount of products, but those are very specific products. For example, they can buy goods and services pertaining to national defense, like fighter jets. That makes that market very narrow. Because, well, if you are Lockheed Martin, and you make and sell fighter jets, where you get your customers? Essentially, your only customer is the US government. And even for more universal, more generic services, each of the government bodies who purchase the service will have their own procurement process and policies. Like for this DocuSign electronic signature software. It's the same software, but selling it to Department of Transportation or to Department of Defense will look very different. A very typical process for government buyers includes a request for proposal, when a government identifies that they need something, and then they publish a public request for proposals asking all companies on the market to make their offers if they're ready to supply goods and services that government needs. Typically, for example, if a town decides to do some road work, a road repair, they identify the streets, they identify the type of road work that they need, and they publish, typically online, request for proposals so that all construction companies in the area submit their bids. How are they willing to perform this work, and what are they willing to charge for this work? So government decides on a set of criteria that includes a price offered by different companies to choose the lowest price, and also different capacities, abilities, and criteria for companies to make sure that they're actually capable of doing a quality work. US federal government is the single largest buyer of goods and services in the world. Just look at the federal budget of the United States. This one is from 2022. Federal government spends over $6.5 trillion annually. The largest spending categories being national defense, Medicare services for healthcare facilities, transfer to states to help them with infrastructure work. Institutional market is a little in between corporate and government. Institutions like educational institutions like our university, price sensitive, but in a very different way than individual customers. Very often they have a fixed budget for purchasing goods and services they use. If the cost is lower, it doesn't mean they're gonna spend less money. That just means they're gonna buy more. So if our university has a budget, hypothetically speaking, of $2 million for specific student surfing software, we can purchase licenses to this software like for $500 per user and provide it to 4,000 students. Or we can purchase it for $400 a piece and provide this service to 500,000 students. The total payment, the total budget is the same, and all money allocated for this kind of spending, they will be spent no matter what. But the lower the cost, the more people, the more users, the more students, in case of university, they can serve. When governments buy very specific things that only governments buy, like defense stuff, right? Military missiles, institutions buy common consumer goods and services, just in larger quantities and for their own use. For example, a university can buy desks, the same desks that anyone can purchase in a supermarket, at Costco. But they're purchasing not one, but 1,000 desks at a time. I hope this brief overview helped you understand how different types of buyers are different from individual consumers and from each other. The key takeaway that there are 4 types of buyers in B2B markets: governments, institutions, producers, and resellers. And their purchasing process and their needs for each of this category is very different from individual consumers that we discussed last week.